Overall, there's a lot of reasons to believe that Riot's headed in the right direction with 2KO's competitive program, namely that they're moving sharply away from the League of Legends model. There's a couple key points of consideration. Internal to 2KO, its developers and leaders are directly from the fighting game community itself, and are in fact some of the most storied and well-regarded individuals in the West Coast scene. To say that the Cannon Brothers, or Guilty Gear Zerd Savior Path to Flip, or Apology Man, or Yohosi don't have a grasp of what the community wants, what it needs, and what the difference is between the two, it is to effectively say that nobody does. Externally, the League of Legends model that's evolved since more than a decade ago has shown its limits and vulnerabilities as of the last couple of years. The intense centralization since the founding of the LCS program was supposed to provide an economic boon to the team organizations formed around it, to some mixed results between its sluggish and clumsy monetization in the first half of its lifespan, the ill-fated collaboration with Saudis and crypto scammers more recently, and the simple yet painful fact that the League of Legends community is steadily aging, implying a lack of generational growth. For those in the weeds, you'll also be familiar with the deeply painful disappointments of its collegiate programs and the fact that the grassroots League of Legends scene effectively does not exist, despite promises of support from team organizations that were supposed to use their franchise military security to bolster their recruitment and training programs. Obviously, that never happened. But just as obviously, that's not a problem for the fighting game scene. Or once esports and fighting game enthusiasts alike would make mockery and crack jokes of its impoverished state and lack of big prize pools, it's now become clear in the years of Sam Bankman-Fried's comeuppance that the FGC model is the only competitive gaming model functionally immune to the whims and failures of corporate policymakers and the guillotines of bean counters. After all, the quantum of a fighting game event is 2 controllers and a screen. A scene that can turn the backrooms of a used game shop into a sauna from the sheer number of competitors there to press buttons for a prize pool measured in a handful of burgers you can afford them this week is not a scene that's there for anything but the game itself. A scene whose biggest tournament of the year is not the $1 million Capcom prize, but the come one come all open brackets of Las Vegas and EVO's Golden Victress controllers, is not one that values the game based on its sponsorship deals and promises of financial security. Which is why the FGC persists. When the promises evaporate and the sponsors get distracted by the next golden marketing goose, there's still going to be somebody trying to get better at BlazBlue. And when they get good enough and attract enough rivals, the legends and stories they generate force others to pay attention to them. So the fact that Riot's publicly stating their intention to support and learn from the TLs and communities instead, even with their history of disappointments and burned bridges with third-party operators like IEM and DreamHack, suggests that developing a proper 2KO community is something they rightfully want to prioritize this time around. While the injection of big checks at major events is certainly helpful to stoke the goals and keep enthusiasm high, their failure to strike similar sparks for Legends of Runeterra and the waning of their flagship product is something that's probably weighing on the minds of their management. However, that's not to say they should take a Nintendo-like approach and outright distance themselves from the community, of course. The other extreme is similarly stifling to the health of the scene and the enthusiasm of its audience. Rather, the best thing that Riot can do for 2KO is to minimize the barriers to entry between its lay audience and its enthusiasts, which is where Clash comes in. Clash, for those that haven't leaked in a hot second, is functionally an automatic monthly tournament system. You set up a team of 5, you get scheduled to play against another pre-made team of similar average strength, and you get awarded with cosmetic prizes and potential skins for doing well. This, in effect, is League of Legends' grassroots program, in as much as one can be when still deeply centralized and readily apparent as a retention tool for players that might otherwise long since gone sick of ranked grinding. A Clash-like system for 2KO, notably, would not be an adequate replacement for tournaments and locals. The blood-deep nature of face-to-face competition and immediate crowd reactions is something that cannot be duplicated by any digital system, but it can definitely complement their efforts. Let's not pretend that Riot doesn't have a tremendous wealth of data on its players. Obviously, a company of its size is deeply interested in deep data, and a good chunk of its employees are dedicated towards winnowing insights from the bottomless pools of numbers and stats. But they don't need to take too much information from Clash to make it useful to the community itself. Just the strengths of a player relative to their geographic region of play. And, importantly, the ability to see who's doing worse or better in their local area. This is certainly a boon to tournament organizers. CD's never been easier if you can see the competitive ratings and trends for literally everybody participating. But this isn't just for their convenience, this is to be a deliberate act of provocation. This is for your buddy to taunt you about doing better than the most recent Clash. This is for an RE enthusiast to realize that somebody else has the local crown for best player on their character. This is for players of niche pairings or unpopular characters to either realize that they're not alone and can practice with somebody else of similar leanings to work out a nuanced interaction, or to provoke them into proselytizing their weird little ways to everybody else via tournament results. This is to drive people to prove themselves against their peers, particularly the ones they can meet face to face, and then to take that drive elsewhere as proper road warriors. So in short, 2KO should launch a Clash, or at least have Clash as a major part of their rollout strategy. I have no doubt that Riot will eventually want a 2KO world system as well, but if their intention is to build it from bottom up this time around, then the most important thing isn't to dangle $1 million and a visit to Madison Square Garden in celebration of the storied East Coast, as bloody impressive as that would be. Isn't even to work out a deal with Sony for an Evo Sunday slot, but to give first-time casters, part-time TOs, and amateur players an emotional investment in the right to start in their own shonen tournament anime. When 2KO gets to that point, when Riot streamlined the on-ramp to that self-driven level of desire and motivation to perform, just for the satisfaction of impressing the people directly involved in your life, then they can say they made a fighting game worthy of the expectations foisted upon them. And they'll have made me a player for life. Again.